Awesome. Hey, Adrian, welcome to the show.
All right. Hey, Andrew, how's it going?
It's going really well. So you had like a wild set of recording sessions going on in Texas, right?
Yeah, so that's what we just finished up. We finished that up literally last week, literally last
Wow.
Tuesday, and that's been just the past 4 or 5 months of preparation of being like, okay, so we're gonna do this, and then we got to find the venue, the staff, the musicians, and then get all the music ready and do everything to get ready for it. It's a pretty long process getting ready for that, but it all pays off, and we did it, and we're done.
Yeah, I've really come around to doing a recording session almost instead of a premiere sometimes. Because I think if you get a really good recording, a premiere's just down the road. You just got to find somebody that loves the piece enough.
Yeah, and so actually, like I have a piece that was commissioned by a group
Mhm.
that was here in Maryland, and I actually recorded it before the premiere. Sometimes that happens. It's just like, and like I don't share any of the video or any of
Mhm.
the audio of that. Like that premiere, that's for them. But like the recording session, the premiere, sometimes for me, those are independent things.
Yeah.
They the premiere performance, and like when I'm writing a piece for a group, really that piece that I'm writing it for them. And then when it
Yeah.
comes to publication later down the road, then I can think about that publication. But I really want the commissioning group to have that experience of playing the
Yeah.
piece and having commissioned it and let it be theirs. Even if recording stuff for publication is happening in the background, I don't want that to interfere with any of the commission stuff. That's pieces for them.
Certainly, yeah, and like it's so special, especially there's like an electricity in the air to go, especially if you get to go coach the group before the commission happens and then be in the hall on the day.
Mm-hmm.
It's like nothing else. It's something. The only experience I could describe it like is like riding a roller coaster where like you're teetering on the edge of like I might die, but what if I don't?
Right.
Or in this case, it's like, will the piece be an absolute catastrophe or will it be incredible?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, you never, if you've only heard it on MIDI, you don't really know how it's going to sound. And I
Yeah.
mean, the most magical experiences are when you're blown out of the water by how cool it sounds. That's
Yeah.
the best.
Yeah, I've really tried to get away from relying on the synthetic rendering, especially recently. I've just had so many pieces where if I've only worked with it on pencil and paper and then just computerized it, the results are like out of my wildest dreams. But like,
Hmm.
I think there's an attachment to what the result could be if everything is perfectly aligned in the way that only a MIDI file can really make it, because a computer will do all of those calculations perfectly. Even if you have a no performer AI running in the background that's going to make enough mistakes and enough idiosyncrasies to make it sound more realistic, it's doing that on purpose.
Right.
Cool.
Yeah.
So what piece were you recording?
We recorded 4 pieces. We recorded a first one was Catalyst. It's about a grade 5 that we just did. That was definitely the hardest piece on the session. I like to put those first
Yeah.
in the session. And then we did a grade 1.5 Machines of Wrath that I've got coming out. We recorded A Place Like Home, which is a nice grade 3. And then we did a little circus piece that's kind of in the works for down the road. But I just got to start on recording it.
Cool.
So
That's awesome. Uh, I think you and I probably have the same thought process on this, but I'm curious, why do you like to put a hard piece first?
I think that ultimately it's just a good use of it's a really good use of the time for a lot of reasons. The hardest piece first, it allows us to get used to each other as a group and be like, okay, so this is the most difficult thing we're going to have to work on together. Let's figure it out together.
Mm.
It also saves their chops a little more later down the session when they're getting tired. Then they're not
Yeah.
having to play quite as much ridiculous stuff. It's a little bit easier to get that stuff out of the way first. And then also in terms of mic placement and everything, they might want to make adjustments. So the first thing I do is I just run the first piece, and we don't really and we know we're not going to use that.
Mm.
So because of that, it's like if we're going to run something and not be able to use it, it might as well be something that's going to be a little bit harder,
Yeah.
that we're not going to quite get it perfectly right away. Like if we got it perfectly right away, it's like, well, we wasted session time.
Mm.
So that's kind of why I like to put the hardest piece first. It makes it just a better experience going into the rest of the session.
Yeah, I imagine like getting people to be more mentally fresh too. Like having it that at the early part of the session. That's something I've thought about when I've done recording sessions in the past. We recorded my symphonic poem Interior this fall. I mean, I can't remember if I've sent that to you. It's like this wild symphonic poem about the national parks from around the U.S. The piece is like 20 minutes, and like
Mm-hmm.
uh, it's like when we actually sat for the recording session, like trying to like front load the session was like priority number one for the conductor and I because all we were thinking about is trumpet chops and mental chops
Mm-hmm.
primarily, and it really makes such a big difference, and it shows like how, especially with the magic of editing, like being able to being able to do so much in post is really to your advantage. And then it's funny because like when I dropped the audio to all of the participants, they were like, this piece is way cooler in order.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. But you record it in the way that makes the most sense, not just the way that it was written. That's not the
Yeah,
purpose of the session. Yeah, I'd love to hear that. I don't think we've talked about it, or
sure.
you've sent it to me before, so I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, I'd love to send it to you. It's a pretty nuts piece. It got its premiere in February, which was really really cool, and we were able to do it
Mm-hmm.
here at Illinois, which was really special. One of my supervisors was the conductor who put it on with his band, and it was like a ton of
Yeah.
fun. And he gave me 4 rehearsals of time to like go in and work with the group and coach them on
Mm-hmm.
it. And honestly, like they didn't need a ton of coaching. I felt like I felt like some like a coach going into a championship game a little bit where where your team, like I imagine Phil Jackson felt like this coach in the 96 Bulls where they were like unbelievable and they really just needed to like, okay guys, calm down, don't let it go too soon
Mm-hmm.
and everything's gonna be great. And like that's really all they needed. And it was such a
Yeah.
special experience to like watch the magic come alive and watch them really dig in and like fall in love with the piece. It was beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Did you conduct?
No, so when we did the recording session, the piece was written as a retirement gift to our director of bands who retired at the end of my first year here at Illinois, Steve Peterson, who's like
Mm-hmm.
one of the great wind ensemble conductors. Really, he's absolutely phenomenal. He and his wife both.
Yeah.
But so Dr. Giraldi had been in the loop. I had sent him the piece and the parts, and I was trying to get him to premiere it with the Wind Symphony, and he said, you know, like I've had a couple of years of stuff planned already, so I don't really know if this is something I can fit in right now. I'd love to conduct a recording session if you put it together. And I was like, well, that's worth its weight in gold. Let's
Yeah.
do
Mm-hmm.
it. That's sweet. So, and really, I don't think the recording would have been anywhere near as good without him, because we did an hour and a half of rehearsal, and then the next Saturday did an hour and a half of recording, and honestly, it was probably closer to an hour and 15 minutes of recording, and we
Mm-hmm.
got all 20 minutes of it, which
Yeah.
is just like nuts. And without like a more seasoned conductor, I don't think that would have been possible.
Yeah.
Because I just finished a recording session for my brass quintet this last week, and granted, like that piece is conceptually way wackier than Interior is, and especially like some of the logistics in it are just nuts. But I think we did 6 or 7 hours of recording for that one, and I mean we nailed everything. It's going to be really really awesome. But like, and I conducted that session because there are just some spots where like the timing of entrances is just really, really wacky. And like, man, if I think if I had tried to do the whole band session, I think it would have been good, but I don't think it would have been great. And so
Yeah. I
like,
mean, yeah, go ahead.
oh, I was just gonna say, I think like having a great conductor makes a world of a difference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's like, especially when you've got limited time, there's not time for and not that you would make mistakes, but it's just like there's not time for like, oh, I didn't conduct that right, let's do it again and see a different way. It's just like, operating on, and also you can't hear as well when you're conducting, like
No.
so like for me, when I'm conducting, I absolutely have other people listening.
Mm.
Like I am not the only ears, because I'm listening to different things. I'm not hearing what they're hearing in the booth. I'm not hearing how the CD is going to sound. I'm
Hmm.
just hearing what the band sounds like.
Yeah, we did a recording session with the composer Chris Cerrone. Is he somebody you've heard of?
I have heard of him.
Yeah, he teaches at Manus. He's like an unbelievable composer. He's I think he's writing a piece for President's Own right now. But we premiered
Yeah.
his song cycle for soprano and wind ensemble this spring, and we ran a recording session with him, and like he was so picky in the booth. I mean, it was really cool to do, and I was shocked in some regards to like how unbelievably detailed he was. But like that recording is going to be incredible. I'm so excited to hear it, and I think that really
Yeah,
makes a lot of a difference.
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you have someone there that can really just make everything, like notice every little detail that's happening. Be
Yeah.
like, okay, so we have everything else, but we need this one little measure here, and go back and
Mhm.
edit that in. Do you edit your own sessions?
Yeah, primarily. I
Yeah.
mean, like, editing's, I don't think editing's that hard. Um, like, because at some point it's a matter of like, how far are you willing to zoom in on Logic?
Well, yes. And you edit in Logic?
Yeah, primarily. I mean, maybe that's like a rudimentary way of doing it, but like it does the job. I don't have to buy new software. I'm able to do it in house. So like, and I'm happy to put in that time just because like it lets me really dig in and get to know the piece even better than I thought, and really get an idea of how it all flows and coordinates
Mm-hmm.
together. And I love learning how to listen that deeply. And then it's fun to like take some time away and come back and realize like, wow, this piece is even better than I imagined.
Mm-hmm.
And usually like I don't think like a an edit I've made is good until I've listened to it 1,000 times and I don't know if I've edited it or not.
Right, right. I mean, that's the thing is, it's you got to spend the time
Yeah,
making them work, and then like my judge of whether or not an edit is good or not is, um, do I hear it?
yeah,
Not do I like all the techniques I use?
yeah,
I don't really care what technique I use. I don't care whether I used a wider or smaller crossfade,
yeah,
or whether I maybe on a different track moved a crossfade somewhere. I don't care. I
yeah.
just care if I hear it.
Yeah, yeah, that's really what I think too. And like, what's interesting about I learned this during the interior recording because like some of the splicing I had to do was like in such weird spots, and like I never thought it would be so different to do a crossfade in fast music versus slow music, but it makes a world of a difference.
Mm-hmm. What are some of the things you learned there?
Oh, in slow music, like the crossfade has to be like super slow. You have to be really picky about it, at least in my experience. Versus in fast music, if you can get a change in like one tiny little second, that's probably where you're going to have the best results.
Yeah.
And like, at what point can you have like another one I really like is if you can change when you have as few instruments playing as possible or as many instruments playing as possible, so that you can get the timbre to be as close as it can possibly
Mm-hmm.
be, so it really just sounds like one pitch. That
Mm-hmm.
makes a world of a difference. And like I'm still shocked at like how incredibly precise you can be if you're just willing to zoom in far enough on Logic. Because like there are times I've done crossfades in like milliseconds
Mm-hmm.
because that's the only way to really make it feel like nothing's happened. It's just
Yeah.
nuts.
Yeah. It takes me a while to do,
Hmm.
but it's
Yeah, me
like,
too.
you yeah, and then, well, I'm thinking about your crossfade duration. There, I mean, it like sometimes even in fast music, if like the timbre between two takes was so different,
Hmm.
it's like you've got to just find that point where like you can find a some sort of timbral,
Yeah,
match. And then sometimes like it has to be wider because there was a suspended cymbal difference in the
hmm,
way that the roll ended or something like that.
yeah,
Um, and then yeah, but like in fast music, I find the best place to make the crossfade is like right before some big hit, just like
yeah,
immediately, just like boom. And
yeah.
um, if you can get it as small as possible, right before something major changes, is the best.
Yeah, sometimes I'll do it during the giant thing because then I can have both happen at the exact same time, and then the escalation
Mm-hmm.
is there, and then I'll cut the take I'm taking out as the like diminuendo from the large event is happening, and so the emergence you have afterwards is the new take, and
Are
that's
you
I find
talking about like right after the downbeat?
Yeah, so like say I have like a huge crescendo that happens, and so there's this like large tutti like singular impact point in the music. I'll have that bleed into the next thing, and I'll have the impact point be actually both at the exact same time, especially if there's a big percussion hit there. And then I'll do the quick fade after because the resonant it will be hidden by the
Hmm.
resonance of what comes after. That can be really helpful too. It's even easier when you have a
Yeah.
slow decrescendo after, like from the large point. This is like how I edit slow music all the time because then you can have a little more umph in the loud and then back off just a little bit.
Hmm.
It's so powerful.
Yeah. Do you ever switch different types of fades?
Um, I think I do
Or you
them all.
mostly stick with the default?
No, I do them all individually. I literally just click on automation and I do them all manually.
All of the how many tracks are you editing?
Um, usually, well, I usually just record in stereo and then I just have all the takes and then, so they're all in one single audio file. And sometimes I
Okay.
have a couple of tracks and I use the track to like lay two things over each other and then just splice them together.
Okay. Okay. That
And
makes sense
maybe,
if
and
you're
maybe, and
editing one
maybe,
track
yeah,
altogether. Yeah.
yeah, and maybe that's like a more rudimentary way of doing things. But
No, no, no.
to be
It's
honest, like,
exactly the same. It's the
cool,
same. It's the same if you have more tracks. It's just
cool.
more tracks.
Yeah, I find it's a little easier to do it that way. If I'm doing a piece that has a couple of movements, like when did a recording session and editing for interior, because interior is four seamless movements. It's kind of like Pines of Rome. Actually, I studied Pines a lot for the structure because that was one of like Steve's favorite pieces, and we played it in his last year here, and I was like, wow, like that. And while we're there, like just on an aside, I think it's really powerful to have like a work that is like that emotional power and that much like pedagogical worth to it. Because
Hmm.
when I really dug into studying Pines to write that piece, I was like, wow, this is like four short pieces with these like super long transitions that just make it seem like other events in the piece. And then it's like
Right.
everything people are looking for in a lot of contemporary music and everything people are looking for in something like like a non-musical audience would want to hear at a concert hall,
Right.
which is like sick. And that's kind of the philosophy I've been trying to write with, especially recently, because like it's got to be enough to be engaging and interesting to the musicians, but like uh, approachable enough that like a concert hall audience is going to pay money to for the tickets. Um, and like I can't think of the number of times I've gone to a show and I'm like, really? That's the best thing on the like that's the new thing on the program? It's kind of crazy. But but yeah, for that what I'll do is I'll usually do sets of tracks for each movement so that like we can get them all going together with each other. And we recorded
Hmm.
each movement individually so we could chunk our way through the piece and chunk our way through the movements and that
Yeah.
was super efficient for the recording process.
Hmm. And well, I was going to say something else that's also the there's just a lot that goes into this that I think folks don't always see right away.
Oh yeah.
There's the prep, and then there's the interaction, how you interact with everybody in the session. This
Mm,
is something I've gotten better at over time. Just like how to find the right way to say something.
mm,
Like just obviously you can't get mad at the players. That doesn't
yeah.
work. It does
Yeah.
it's not helpful. And it doesn't help them play better. I think of everything that I say from the podium as how is what I'm going to say help them play better.
Yeah. Yeah, one thing I think about a lot is how can I tell them exactly what I need in the music and then be relentlessly positive? And sometimes it's as simple as like, horns, I need like way more there, like way more volume. Feel free to play out, go for it. You guys are doing great. And
Mm-hmm.
it's so interesting how like I mean, because where somebody else would be like, horns, what are you doing? That needs to be way louder. But like those two things, the empowerment to like go for it. You got it.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go. Like they give so much. And that energy comes through in the recording too. It's so powerful.
Yeah, I mean, the more I think about it, there's really no place for negativity in the recording
Yeah.
space. It's not.
Yeah.
It's never helpful.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
cannot intimidate somebody into. You can't intimidate a professional player into playing better.
Yeah.
It's not a thing that works.
Yeah, I mean, you can't
and
even,
it's not right.
you can't, I don't think you can intimidate any player into playing better. I mean, you can shout and scream and get people to
Right.
like work harder in the practice room, but like you can't do that in a session. Yeah, and
No,
even then,
no.
like anybody that does that in an ensemble in the long arc is going to get diminishing returns.
Yeah, it's the more the more I've seen us work with that positive stuff in the recording space, the better everything's gotten. And it's just like and everybody's like, wow, we love this. And
Yeah.
like they just want to do more of it. And it's
Yeah,
like, well, I want to do more of it too. And so we just keep it keeps on moving forward.
for sure. I think people really remember the experiences they have, and if the experience working with you is magical, what they're going to do is tell all of their friends, like, hey, when I worked with Adrian, it was magical. And then those people are going to tell their friends, like, oh, well, my friend worked with Adrian and their experience was magical. And at that point, like, you've impacted hundreds of people.
Right.
And that makes such a huge difference, especially in this kind of an industry, because like, well, I think this is the case for a lot of things, but especially in the arts, like trust is so high on word of mouth.
That's we're not in the business of music, we're in the business of people.
Yeah, yeah,
And yeah, music is just the vehicle
hmm,
that we use,
definitely,
but really it's about people. It's about, and
definitely.
like for me, the sessions that I do, a lot of it is, or almost all of it is music that's going to be played by elementary, middle, and high schools around the country and around the world.
Yeah,
And it's really, yeah, it's for me. I mean, I enjoy it a lot, but really it's for the students.
hmm,
It's for the students to have a model to play after, and for them to have something that they can go off of to reference and be like, wow, that sounds really cool. I want to sound like that.
yeah.
And that's what I want them to walk away with.
So I have a pair of questions that I've thought of based on what you just said. I'm curious about what inspires you to write, since like um, just to give you an idea, some of the pieces I listened to of yours in prepping for this interview, I listened to Journey of a Comet, Orbital, Force Field, Contraption, Guardians, Spirit of the Dauntless, Forgotten Tales of the West, Lucid Dreams, and Sword of Orion. And that's just like,
Yeah,
I mean, I literally just searched your name on YouTube, and those were like a bunch of the things that came up, which I thought was super cool that you have so many publications already. I mean, especially for how young you are. You just graduated with your master's degree, right?
right. Well, I'm still working on a master's.
Oh, awesome.
So,
Oh, did
but
you finish
yeah,
your first year at Texas?
I did first year.
Awesome. Yeah, man, that's awesome. That's a great
Thank
school
you.
too. I love a lot of the faculty there. They're really awesome. Like Donald Grantham is unbelievably
Absolutely.
awesome, and
One of the
Mark
kindest
Thomas
people.
is so talented. But in my opinion, the hidden gem at that campus is Yevgeny Charlot. I think he's awesome.
He's fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah, he's so smart, and all of his music is like so interesting and intricate, and it's like it's viewing the art form from like a slight angle from so many other people and how they would approach it. It's so cool.
Yeah,
Um,
he's really fantastic.
but the one of the things I wanted to ask is, so what inspires you to write? Because I mean, you have a lot of pieces that seem to be about like heroes and space. Um, so I'm just curious.
I mean, I like action movies. I
Yeah,
like that driving forward energy, and it's kind of sometimes part of my personality too. And so that's just I just find something that I'm like, I want to run with this, and like, what kind of music do I want to capture here? Again, I just love that kind of action cinematic sound. That's where I'm at right now.
yeah,
It might change, but that's where I'm at, and that's just kind of what I've gone with. I went into a school once, and the student handed me a piece of music of mine and crossed out the title and wrote space music. And I'm like, they're like, all your music sounds like space music. I'm like, I can't really disagree. Um, I hope you've enjoyed it.
yeah,
So yeah, I mean, I guess ultimately when I'm writing for students, what I'm inspired by is hopefully the fact that they will walk away from it being like, wow, I didn't know I could play it. I didn't know that a piece like that could exist. And
yeah,
I didn't know that a piece could exist that created that much energy.
yeah.
So
Did you encounter a composer when you were growing up that made you feel that way?
it made me feel that way. Wow. Um, that okay. I mean, for that, like for me, that's what happens when I listen to John Williams
Yeah,
and just
yeah,
his
me too.
especially his stuff that's not like that's not his main themes. Like the stuff that
Yeah,
he just kind of goes off in fast development is just like I'm like, wow, I want to bring that.
Yeah.
into this space. The only piece of the pieces you listed, the only ones that I really think go there are maybe Orbital
Mm.
and yeah, like that really just like get that next level of energy.
Yeah.
Probably from that list, probably just Orbital.
Yeah, for me, like one of the composers I think makes me feel that way is John Mackey, and
Mhm.
I'm very
Yeah.
lucky in that like I I've only encountered some of his best work as far as the stuff that I've played. I think I've listened to his entire output, but like um I've only performed his clarinet concerto, his trombone concerto, and Frozen Cathedral, like all of which are like unbelievable masterpieces.
Yeah.
And it's like
Yeah.
it's so fascinating for me, like especially having worked with those soloists. Like I was really lucky in that I got to Professor Junkin was actually the conductor at the National Concert Band Festival Honor Band in
Mhm.
2013, which was the year one of the years I went, and he flew in Joe Alessi to play Harvest with us, and like
Yeah.
the power and like the capriciousness, but like also how planned and intuitive everything was, and the build of the energy throughout that piece was like nothing I had ever encountered.
Hmm.
And it was like it like tore a hole in my brain I never knew could exist. And that I'd only ever really heard in like the voice of another, like one other composer whose music I'd played before, and that was David Maslanka.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's just
And he's fantastic. His music
yeah,
is great.
yeah. I mean, I think I've been lucky enough to play Symphony 4 like 3 times, which is
Hmm.
unbelievable. And like every time, it's like I'm re-encountering something never knew I needed, and like a level of emotional expression I didn't know was possible. It's
Hmm.
really something.
Yeah, I love that one. I have the score for that one. I've just been looking at it a lot, and just it's
Yeah.
really really great to dig into. It's just also that music. It's especially the Fourth Symphony. It's just like I don't know. Some music is a little unintuitive sometimes. That music, it's just like it just like I look at the score and I'm like, this is exactly what needed to happen here. This makes sense. Like like my predictions in my brain are pretty much correct about what
Mm.
happens
Yeah.
with it, and like it just if it's a real it's just a very intuitive piece to me that feels like it was it goes the way exactly the way it should go
Yeah.
in a lot of ways. So
Yeah. It's like perfect in its simplicity and like simple in its complexity. It's like nothing else I've ever listened to or ever looked at. It's
mhm.
really quite stunning. Um, d- I'm curious, what kind of like non-classical music do you like to listen to?
Oh yeah, I mean I'm listening to a lot of soundtracks and film things. I'll dabble a little bit into some hip hop and R&B sounds. I think those things bring
Nice.
a little more depth to the harmony. One of my favorite, and I so desperately need to watch this movie. I need to watch Tenet, but the Ludwig Göransson's soundtrack to that, especially one of
Yeah.
those opening tracks, Rainy Night in Talon, just like absolutely one of my favorite tracks ever. It's just the way he uses rhythm, the way he develops it over like 8 minutes without any sort of like real melody or anything.
Mm.
Just just an incredible piece of music and piece of art,
Yeah.
music aside. So
Yeah. I'm I'm interested. Do you think R&B is kind of slept on in the classical music community? Because I had an idea like this year about I think R&B would be a really effective means of teaching brass wind pedagogy because you have to have like a ton of lyricism and a ton of like harmonic awareness and really be on top of the rhythm in a way that like bel canto singing just doesn't have you do.
yeah, I mean, I think that looking at I, I just like I just don't like any like no genre is
Yeah.
I think we have to approach music from the perspective that everything all art is worthy of every appreciation. Like
Of
there's
course.
and so I just always think we approach every piece of art like that. If we're not familiar with an art style, we
Mhm.
listen to it and we're like, all right,
Yeah.
what does this have to offer? And what does that have to offer rather than looking for something to criticize? That's not That's never
Yeah.
how we. That's not never the philosophy.
Yeah, I mean,
The
I was
approach.
thinking about it more just in terms of efficiency. And you think about like trying to save a student time and how can you have them work on a lot of things at once. It strikes me that like, well, not only is I just love how emotional R&B music is. It's like so
Mhm.
smooth and it's so
Right.
visceral and it's beautiful, but like it's very rhythmically complex compared to like Western European rhythmic
Hmm.
structure. And so like having a means to like have a student do two things at once to me is like an absolute win.
Absolutely.
So I was curious, uh, what made you or like whose music got you to fall in love with like playing music and writing music?
I think I just like I definitely fell in love with band like in
Mhm.
middle school and everything. And I think that someone whose melodies just always spoke to me throughout and still speak to me today, like Bob Sheldon.
Yeah.
Like I think you'd be hard pressed to find a Robert Sheldon piece that doesn't have just a phenomenal melody. And that's a characteristic of my music that I think that's really important to me. And I definitely get complimented on melody a lot. People are like, you have really nice melodies. And I'm like, well, I have really, really great models. Bob Sheldon being one of those models, obviously we talked about John Williams earlier.
Yeah.
He's one of those models. And so like for me, that's kind of where my standard of melody is of like, what's a good melody? Well,
Yeah.
there's one person from concert band and there's one person from like the greater film world that I would point to
Yeah.
as, those are melodies that are A plus in their respective areas.
Certainly. Yeah, and it's interesting how like melodic music is like the thing that helps people fall in love with it. I don't know if you've felt this way as you've climbed higher into academia, but like one thing I've definitely experienced is like there's like almost a derision to melodic music in some circles, and I think that's like kind of a shame because, and maybe it's I'm misinterpreting what people are saying to me, but like if you're not helping people fall in love with music, like what's the point?
Well, I think ultimately, as we climb higher and higher into our musical intellect of what we're thinking, the some of the things that originally caused us, we sometimes maybe forget about some of the things that originally
Yeah.
caused us to fall in love and connect with what we're hearing. And again, like you said, I think melody is often a gateway for people to really connect with something that somebody's saying. A melody is like a
Yeah.
sentence that somebody's saying, and if
Yeah.
we're just putting uh, a bunch of words together, it's like, well, we want to hear that in a sentence. And so that's maybe
Yeah.
the initial way that people connect with it. And for me, that's very much still a way that I connect with music in other ways as well, but melody is very much a way that I still connect with music and still have a deep emotional um and so I generally just I generally just continue with that because it works really well,
Yeah.
and people really like it and I really like it. So
Yeah.
but there's a lot of different approaches there.
Cool. Uh, so I listened to an interview with John Corigliano last summer, and one of the things he said is that our active musical decisions, our active compositional decisions, determine what our techniques are, and our passive musical decisions determine what our voice is. How would you describe your musical voice?
Oh wow. It's a lot to unpack in that statement, that
Yeah.
Corigliano quote. Um wow, I would describe my voice as definitely as something that, again, a lot of melodic energy, a lot of rhythmic energy, and also the ability to, well, in both ways, both in an intensity way and in a way to be able to pull it back and give us something very, very calm and relaxing, both at higher levels and at a younger level of playing. One that I would point to that I don't think was on your list, Moonlight Bliss,
Cool.
is a very, very
Be sure to listen to
simple,
that.
simple little melody that I think has a lot of emotional energy in there. And sure, it's a grade one, but it's like that's not. I didn't write it because it's a grade one. I wrote it because,
Yeah.
and it's a grade one because not because it's simple in every way, but it's a nice
Yeah.
lyrical melody that was able to be developed in a way that didn't require a whole bunch of extra rhythms and techniques and ranges. It
Yeah.
just happened to be available within that younger ability level there.
Yeah.
So,
Great art that is accessible to a young audience will get played a lot because it's going to
and
be the
yeah,
best thing to facilitate the teaching of playing the instrument.
right. And that's something I try to do is I try to, even to the youngest levels that I can, I still try to bring the most authentic me, and I still try to
Yeah.
give them something uh something worthy of deeper study, and something worthy of
Certainly.
like I don't want to say I'm trying to put a grade 5 into a grade 1. I'm not trying to do that,
Yeah.
but I am trying to bring the same level of effort and bring the same level of authenticity to even something that is playable by first or second year players.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's super important. Uh, so then going back to the first part of that quote, what are some of your favorite techniques to use?
I like and this is, well, I guess this is actually good for me to look at myself, because it's how we kind of break out of
Mhm.
some of the things that we do a lot. I tend to repeat a lot of ostinatos a lot, just like a rhythmic ostinato, and vary it a little bit, and
Mhm.
that's a lot of fun to do.
Yeah.
One of my things that I use a lot is like just low brass chords. They just sound really good.
Yeah, dude, it's the
They just sound
best.
great. And everyone's
Yeah.
like, man, do something different. And I'm like, yeah, I should do something different.
Yeah.
But it sounds so cool.
Yeah.
So
Or maybe not necessarily do something radically different, but drop it in a bit of a different place. How much like
yeah, and I
one
think
thing
that's
I
it.
try to
Yeah.
approach a lot is like, okay, if we have these techniques that work, we should use them because they work. But like, how might I like be idiosyncratic in when I bring it in, or how I introduce it, or why I'm using it at a certain place? Like that can be thinking outside the box in and of itself without having to necessarily reinvent the wheel. And I think that's really cool.
Yeah, and so it's just varying
Hmm.
some of those things. But those are some of the things that are important to me. The I will use the euphonium as a very melodic instrument a lot, and just like give the
Yeah.
euphonium parts that are
You're preaching to the
all
choir, man.
across the
I'm a
band.
euphonium player. I don't know if you know this. I
All
did
right.
like a 8-part series last year interviewing euphonium players from like all over the world.
Okay.
Like, hey, how
Yeah.
would you prefer people write for euphonium? So it's
Hmm.
funny that you bring that up.
One of the most versatile instruments in the band, and
Yeah, certainly.
something you can put them with the flute. Well, maybe not flute necessarily, but it could work. Maybe I'll try
Yeah.
that next time. You could
I
put them with clarinets, horns, trumpets, trombones,
yeah.
tubas, anything.
Is Hiram Diaz somebody you've met at all? He's
We've interacted a little bit.
Yeah, he's a DC guy. He's a phenomenal euphonium player with the President's Own. One of the
Yeah.
things he likes to talk about is how like the euphonium is the chameleon of the band, and I've kind of adopted that a little bit as a composer. I think of the euphonium as like the gain boost of like the acoustic gain boost
Right.
of the wind ensemble because
Yeah.
it blends so well with everything that you're just kind of like, hey, can you make whatever else is playing a little louder?
Yeah. I mean, the euphonium. Okay. I think in EQ graphs a lot. The way I think of the euphonium is if you took an EQ graph and just boosted like the low mids.
Yeah,
It's just like that's the sound, and like you can boost the low mids of any instrument frequency and by using that instrument.
yeah,
There you go.
it's really cool. That's awesome. What other techniques do you use?
I like to use definitely like to use percussion
Yeah,
a lot, in terms of just like adding some different colors here and there. Like like if I listen to a passage in Note Performer or whatever, and I'm like, this is not really coming together well. Sometimes all it's missing is just a little percussion sparkle, like a
yeah,
little triangle here, or a suspended cymbal roll, or some timpani. And like
yeah,
one of my favorite things to use is to just do those things all over. Like, okay, so
yeah,
we're going to use triangle here, then we're going to use bass drum, then we're going to use timpani, then we're going to use snare drum. And just through all those instruments, even if it's very, very light texture, you can still have
yeah.
an extremely rich sound,
Yeah,
and extremely engage your audience, engage your listener really, really well.
yeah. And then
even in a sparse
it
passage.
gets like complex and has all this forward momentum because even though the rhythm is sparse, it has this sense of like forward propulsion and this unpredictability of
Hmm.
like what's gonna come in next. Yeah,
Right.
I do that a lot too. I think that's one of the simplest things you can do to add a lot of value to music right away. And that's something like a young composer can even try because you really don't. And then at some point, they just need to learn that less is a little bit more in a texture like that.
Yeah, and then well, like specific placement of percussion, right? Like crash cymbals.
Yeah.
There's a lot of places where crash cymbals can add a lot to your music. Um, there's also comes a point where you can use it too much.
Yeah.
Same thing with suspended cymbal, and it's like, okay, what moments do you really, really want that to sparkle?
Mm.
I try I like suspended cymbal. It's an instrument I use a lot, and
Mhm.
I use it a lot at various swells and phrase points. But there might be moments where I'm like, okay, maybe this specific texture where I want like a darker to open up into a darker sound.
Yeah.
Maybe suspended cymbal isn't the right color. Maybe I want to use a bass drum and timpani swell instead.
Yeah.
And so just varying those, like, that propulsion of energy using a different way to get there
Totally.
can be great too.
Yeah, I find myself like I rarely use suspended cymbal, and when I do, it's like it's usually when I need something brighter or like I have the person who's covering tam tam doing something else. But like I like that tam tam so much more because there's it's the I equate it kind of like the difference between bass drum and snare drum, where like the smaller one is so bright that it can really overpower too quickly. And you have so much
Mhm.
subtlety you can do with something that's a lot larger.
Yeah. Yeah, well, you're funny you bring up tam tam. That's been one of my favorite techniques recently is just like when the energy of the piece feels maxed out, what else can you do? You can add a tam tam and just,
Yeah.
it's another layer of energy that the audience isn't always expecting that you can kind of just throw on top of everything, and it works really well.
Absolutely. Yeah, and especially like driving an impact point because like you get so
Hmm.
much high and so much low frequency out of it. It's just like and then you get the wash and it's like, "Oh man, it's the
Right,
best."
you're just covered in the sound, and it doesn't even need to be super loud, and it
Yeah.
just like adds like a level of shimmer to the ensemble, and the ensemble
Yeah.
doesn't need to play louder, but it
Yeah.
just feels more it's like you're just encased in another level of
Like there's more
energy.
present.
Right.
Yeah. So, can you walk me through a little bit of your creative process? Like if you're starting a new piece, what do you do?
Cry.
Really?
No, no. I mean, but maybe mentally. Um, that was a joke. I will start with. I usually like to start with some idea, but sometimes, I mean, more often than not, a lot of times it starts with a deadline.
Mhm.
It starts with the fact that I've got to get something done, and I need to find something to write about. Um, One of my favorite things to tell other composers is that, especially developing composers, is that you're not going to gain your inspiration for writing from writing. You're going to gain your inspiration from writing from all the other things that you do.
Yeah.
So sometimes, like, I'll need to just go take a walk, and sometimes, like, it's that walk that maybe I'll see something on the walk. I'll see a bird, or I'll see a beautiful landscape, or something else that's not music related that's going to inspire
Yeah.
this musical sound. And I think it's just important for all of us to remember that it's all those things outside of music that bring meaning to this musical world that we live in.
Yeah, like if you want to imbue your music with living energy, you have to live. That sounds like it, it's you wouldn't think you need to tell people that, but some people have a really hard time figuring that out.
Yeah, well, and it's just like we love what we do so much that sometimes we get so wrapped up and
Yeah.
absorbed in it, and we need to step away from it for a
Yeah.
minute
When it's an
and remember
isolating
all the other things.
existence, it's an isolating existence to be a composer. It's very difficult, especially if you're a people person, because you have to really be able to balance spending a lot of time by yourself in order to really like carve what this is going to be into reality.
Right. Right. Yeah, you definitely have to be willing to spend that time by yourself. But like at the same time, right? Then schools will have me in, and I'll be in the classroom, and I'll be working with people and get that side of it
Yeah.
as well. And then
Yeah.
the recording session, working with people, getting all that stuff ready in that way. And so it's a balance thing there. I love the alone time when I'm writing, and I also love collaborating with people. So it's kind of
Yeah.
that perfect mix of both there for me.
Yeah. Yeah, that's one of my favorite things too. I love being in the trenches of like writing and figuring out what the piece is going to be. And then I get almost as big, if not bigger, a rush from like actually working on it with people and
Right.
watching the piece come alive.
Right.
So once you've picked on like a topic or an idea that you're going to write about, what's next?
Uh, in the past, I would go right to the notation software and go right in and write something. Um, very, very, very recently, I've started sketching some stuff out first, and especially like even within the software, like maybe I'll even do a full piece sketch, and I don't know who's going to play what, but I've written the piece in um several different piano staves, and then I don't know who's going to play what yet, and go back and orchestrate it, and we'll see how that goes. But I generally just go right to the full score, and I'll start writing there, and flesh things out from that. Maybe like that's where I'll get a situation where I have a section of music written for the winds, and then like I'll go back and add some of those percussion colors to make it sparkle a little bit. So
Cool. Have you ever had a teacher ask you to write something completely by hand?
I have not had that specific request, but I have had a teacher say you should start sketching stuff by hand.
Yeah.
I mean, not a whole piece by hand.
Yeah, I did an entire piece by hand this semester. Um, I was working on a string quartet with my teacher, and I said, like, this is something I think I should be doing. She was like, okay, now you have to.
Okay, how'd it go?
Um, I learned a lot. Not only was it like I had to really think a lot about what I was like every little gesture because it took so much more time to commit things to paper and
Yeah.
like really trying to have a good idea of a plan. But once I had a good idea of a plan, it was pretty efficient to execute. Um, because I had all of the details figured out. And then I
Mm-hmm.
also realized that like you can really have a lot of things happen in a small amount of time with if you have timbre change rather than necessarily notes change. So like you can have this illusion of music that's incredibly active, but it's actually
Mm-hmm.
very subtle because you're working with intricate amounts of color. And the piece I was writing was three movements based on paintings by Claude Monet. And so, especially given the subtlety of his art style, his desire to work with contrasts of lighting, these like blurry textures of a lot of intricate colors and brushstrokes, I really felt like the string quartet was the only ensemble, other than maybe like string orchestra, that would really
Mm-hmm.
capture that well because you
Right.
can score really like close, high harmonies without worrying about, especially at a slow tempo, without worrying about your players just absolutely having their chops annihilated. And so, and like, especially if you ask string players to just do like slow tremolos, they're like, "Yeah, I got this all day, man."
Right.
So,
Yeah.
like,
It's so easy to play up there.
yeah,
Well, it's not easy, but it's just
yeah,
like the
it's
effort level is different than like if you're trying to have
yeah.
trumpets play up there, pianists. No.
Yeah, it requires the mental focus of like how does this slow unfolding happen? One of the other things one of my
Right.
professors suggested to me was handwriting, especially chamber music on 11 by 17 staff paper, because when you have 33 staves per page, um, you can see an idea develop down a page that you just can't on like 8 or 12 staff, 8.5 by 11
Mhm.
paper, because the brain is really good at capturing things that are in frame with each other and
Right.
connect. So, like, one of the things that I was working on this year was when I wanted to work on writing longer phrases in like a wind ensemble piece. I tried to write in panorama mode. I
Hmm.
use Dorco. I don't know what you use, but so
Okay.
like it's panorama mode in some places. The Dorco calls it galley view, and so, but like, so you have the infinite score. So, and
Yep.
one thing I find really helpful about that, whether or not I'm trying to write a longer phrase, is I get an idea of how the continuity of the piece flows. And I
Mhm.
love how I feel like I'm writing in a DAW almost, like an acoustic DAW, which is fun because then I get the sense of how the piece develops and flows, and I can focus just on the music rather than because I'm so anal retentive about music looking perfect on the page. But so outsourcing the engraving to later in the game is really helpful for me because then I can
Yeah.
just make sure, okay, this is of high musical value, and then I'll make it look nice on the page in a bit.
Yep. Yeah, I mean that's a big thing for me is the proofreading and engraving and all that stuff too.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah. And do you self-publish?
At the moment, yes.
Okay.
Which I mean is like not super lucrative, but I haven't found a publishing house that I've really had a great vibe from yet. I met with Randall Standridge at Midwest this year. I just don't have enough stuff that I think he'd be interested in order to submit to his catalog. But I really like the philosophy of his company because one thing I'm really passionate about is how can I get a complex musical idea, not necessarily like a complex melody, but like um, something like something like performing with extended technique,
Hmm.
for example. How can I make that digestible to a junior high band? Because
Yeah.
I think the stuff like that is what makes music class even more enjoyable. And when
Hmm.
and so part of my background is actually teaching elementary and pre-K a little bit. And the thing I took away from that experience the most was young children, especially, are way smarter than people give them credit for. They just don't
Absolutely.
like their brains just haven't acclimated to being a lot of places because they're five.
Hmm. Right.
And so, so like, my approach to writing wind ensemble music is exactly the same. Is okay, how can I challenge them intellectually, and how can I translate it into a way that's simple enough that they'll be able to grasp it right away?
Hmm. I love that.
Yeah, and that's a lot of what Randall is interested in. His publishing company doesn't really do anything beyond grade 3.5. And I probably have one grade 3 piece and one grade 2 piece, and the grade 2 piece is not that good. So, well, I mean, I wrote it like years ago. So, a lot of the stuff I've been writing recently has been chamber music or wind ensemble music that's a little more on the complex side. Because I've been really trying to stretch my idea of like what
Hmm.
the orchestrating in wind ensemble is capable of, uh, which has been a really fun process. And now that I've kind of finished that growth arc, I'm ready to write a lot more like grade 2, grade 3, grade 4 kind of stuff. And that's probably what I'm going to send him when I've got some finished.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, Randall's great. Yeah, Randall's got a really great thing going.
Yeah.
And that's like how do you self-publish? Well, there's your method book.
Yeah,
Um,
seriously.
you know, and so watching what he's done, watching what other folks have done has definitely helped me to
Mm,
kind of put that stuff on the map too. The self-publishing stuff, it's because all the stuff I record is self-published.
mhm,
Like Journey of a Comet, Orbital, those are not self-published. Those were publisher recordings, which are fantastic.
mhm.
But it's like the self-published stuff, the like once I one like for okay, the published stuff, once I get to a certain point, once the music is done, I can send it off and they just take care of the rest. Then like the self-publishing, then I've got to take it and engrave it and make it look great and do all the marketing and do all the cover stuff and do
Mhm.
it, the probably twice, if not more, as much work
Yeah,
to
it
get
really
it
is.
to get it to the same quality standards as what the publishers would put out.
Mhm.
It's kind of ridiculous the amount that it takes to get close to that.
Yeah. Um, it is at some point, like for me, I think it's kind of worth it though. I mean, because like somebody I also really look up to in that regard is John Mackey because I mean he's like
Mm-hmm.
one of the original self-publishers, and one of the things I respect so much about that is like when you get a John like even a part to a John Mackey piece, you're like, oh, this is John Mackey. I
Mm-hmm.
think it's really cool that like it's so uniform and it's so consistent that people are able to do that. And that's kind of one of the things I aspire to. I mean, even if it's down to like the font I use in the title of my
Mm-hmm.
music. Like I want people to look at it and like even if my name's not on the top, they're like, "Oh, this is Andrews." How do I know? Cuz he used that font. And
Mm-hmm.
the stuff is laid out down the page in exactly this way and things feel intuitive and there aren't bad page turns and like teeny tiny little things like that that leave my fingerprints
Right.
all over it. And I think there's something special about that.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's. I was talking to our conductor, or the person who I conducted and produced the last session with, Tyler Ehrlich, and I was like all the like the magic of what we do is in the details.
Yes.
All the magic is in all those little details that nobody notices
Mhm.
add up to become the final product. And it's
Yeah.
like everyone's like, well, how does it look like this? How is it so magical? Because every single detail was paid attention to. That's why.
Yeah. Yeah, down to how does it look too cramped when these staves
Right.
are this distance together as opposed to this distance together? And then once you've paid attention to that, how does it flow down the page? And is there a spot where it seems too cramped together versus not? Yeah, I know a lot of people who never think about that kind of stuff. But
Hmm.
at some like I had a friend one time, he like put like one articulation marking on one thing and then just like wrote a note like sim for all other notes like this. And I was like, dude, you have a computer. Just put it on all of them.
Yeah.
And like it seems crazy, but taking the time and the energy to just do that, especially when it takes like 3 minutes. Like, yeah, okay, it's tedious, but like that makes a world of a difference. It makes the music look so much more professional.
Hmm. There's I will always do whatever it takes to make life easier for the musician, whatever that is. And everybody
Yes.
has a different philosophy on what actually makes it easier for the musicians. But like that's always my
Mhm.
philosophy. My philosophy is also on the fact that we should make it as easy as possible to read and to be able to sight read, right? Even
Yeah.
if they're not sight reading, like why make it more difficult
Yeah.
if we don't need to? Like just like even if it's very complex music, and if it's very complex and needs all that, great. But if there is an easier way to write it and it sounds exactly the same, let's do that.
Yeah.
Um, I, I'm just all about efficiency, simplicity
Yeah.
within the notation world, like as simple as possible.
Yeah, the axiom I've come to in that regard is I want my music to have the fewest mental calculations per beat,
Right.
per measure, and per phrase. And if I do
Mm-hmm.
that, then it will have the minimal number of mental calculations for the entire piece in order to perform. And then people will be able to look at the phrase and go, oh, it sounds like this. And when they can do that, then they're like, wow, I can like make music out of
Mm-hmm.
this. Because
Right.
if they're so worried about deciphering the glyphs on the page, you've just like put up roadblocks to them being able to make their best sound.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
it's
Anything that takes away is not
yeah.
helpful.
Well, and at some point, like if your music feels easy to play and they feel great playing it, people are gonna want to play it more.
Right. Right. One of my favorite quotes is from a quote, something he told me, Chris Bernitas at Alfred. He's the editor for Alfred Music, and he said anything that could cause a hand to go up in rehearsal is something that you should fix on page.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
yeah, any like if there's something that's going to cause have a someone's going to have a question about it, let's just as long as it's not too many words or anything, let's clarify it. I also am a fan of use as few as possible words to explain what you need to explain.
Mhm.
Like if you need a paragraph at the top of your music and it's justified, then you need it. But
Mhm.
if there's a way to say that in a way that's only a few words, I will always favor the path of fewer words.
Yeah, certainly. I think that's a great point. Um, I think we only have time for one more question. I've been curious, what's the most difficult piece, or maybe not the most difficult piece, which piece that you've written was the most difficult for you to write?
So this past year, I've written a piece for collegiate wind ensemble called A Realm of Possibilities. That one I worked on with Professor Grantham, and that was really and he was just encouraging to continue to keep writing. And for me, with approaching a larger piece like that, it took it was scary because it took a lot more confidence to know that it's going to happen. And there were days that I was writing that I was like, this is not what I want it to be. Maybe I should just stop. And I would bring it into to lessons, and he'd be like, "No, it's really good. You should
Mhm.
keep on going and keep on writing, and just believe in yourself that you can finish the piece and keep doing it." And so it took several months to write, but once I got down to it at the end of it, I was like, okay, so like this is something I can do. I am able to write much more long form music with large ensemble and still and have it be something that I'm proud of. So yeah, Donald Grantham has been really helpful in me just getting uh is supporting me through that process of that piece.
Yeah.
So
A great teacher makes a big difference, for sure.
yes.
What was difficult about writing something long form?
Finding ways to it's actually it's not long form music that's difficult for me. It's long form within large ensemble because I
Interesting.
like to have everybody doing something a lot. And I just need to
Yeah.
realize that everybody doesn't always have to be doing something.
Yeah.
And it sounds like a simple thing, but it's
Mm,
just like it's natural. When you have all those staves, you want to fill them up and
yeah.
you don't need to.
Yeah.
Um,
I think one of the things that helped me get through that is I mean, especially playing euphonium in the Wind Symphony here at Illinois. I mean, we played a ton of new stuff, and like the times I enjoyed myself the most was when like we had a piece where even if I wasn't playing, I couldn't think about anything else because the music was so engaging to listen to. Um, there's a work by a conductor composer named Lindsay Bronicant. It's called Tarot. Is this a piece you know?
mhm. I don't know.
Yeah.
I've heard of this composer. I don't know the piece.
Oh man, you got to check out this piece. I think it's one of the best things written for wind ensemble in the last 10 years. By
Tell me
like a
again.
lot. It's called Tarot, Tarot. I think there's 2 or 3 recordings on YouTube. I think Michigan's got
Okay.
one. I think Illinois' got the other. It's like a newer piece. And Lindsay teaches in she might be at UMass Amherst. I can't remember. The
Mhm.
last I knew she was somewhere in the Northeast, but like I mean, unbelievably interesting piece. It's
Yeah.
so colorful, it's so engaging. It uses the wind ensemble expertly, and it's just very special. And
Mhm.
the second movement in particular, it's a longer, slower movement, but at no point could I like think about other stuff while we were performing it because the music was so engaging. And that's when I kind of
Mhm.
realized like, okay, well, I think that's what we should aspire to.
Right.
Is that the music is so powerful that people are like, I can't look away. I can't be out of
Mhm.
focus. This is too awesome and too interesting and too cool. I think it makes a lot of difference.
Yeah, you want to keep the listeners in engagement
Yeah,
throughout, whether it's a 30-minute piece or whether it's a 3-minute piece, and just
absolutely.
keep them there.
Yeah. And then it gives you a chance to like have this more evolving kind of texture. That's something I learned from David Maslanka too, is that like
Mhm.
he rarely leaves the orchestration stagnant unless it's like tutti, but then like you kind of have to because it's tutti.
Mhm. Yeah.
And so
Mhm.
like if you always have one instrument, at least one instrument that's changing, then there's always something for the ear to grab onto because there's so much variety all the time as things slowly evolve over the course of a gesture.
Right, and there's something I always tell my students, especially as they're just starting to develop, is if you have a statement of something that repeats, if it repeats, never repeat it exactly the same way.
Yeah.
Change something about it. There's
Yeah.
always be something different.
Yeah, at a minimum,
Um,
change the orchestration.
yeah,
At
yeah,
a
and
minimum.
even if you change the orchestration, then
Yeah.
maybe you change a couple notes in the melody to give it something
Yeah.
else for the listener to grab onto.
Yeah.
Um,
One
so yeah.
one thing I found really helpful for like getting more out of a single idea is changing the mode because
Mhm.
you don't even need to change the key. Changing the mode is like such a different flavor. And then you have to change a few notes to make it really fit that mode a little better. And so
Yep. Mhm.
and then you get this really extreme contrast in flavor too. And so you can get an idea that changes color through a piece, not just through the
Mhm.
orchestration, but through tonality.
Right.
And and then you also have to change some of the intervallic content too, and that makes such a big
Mhm.
difference. You get so much out of so little. And then it makes like the idea stage then becomes kind of easy because you're like, I think I have too many things.
Right. Right. And you just simplify down from there and figure out what needs to be in the piece, and
Yeah,
you're set.
awesome. So, what's up next for you?
So I have quite a few projects to finish before school starts in the fall. Various concert band things and marching band stuff. And then once school starts in the fall, I'm going to work on some more larger projects for mostly wind ensemble.
Nice.
And then after that, I'm not quite sure, but yeah, I'll do some larger works for wind ensemble during my last year of study at UT, and then
That's
kind of go
awesome.
from there.
When you say larger works for wind ensemble, what does that entail?
It's just like longer pieces. We're talking
Cool.
ten, 15 minutes
Wow. Yeah, that'll be
or
something.
or, or more.
I mean,
So
you have a pretty big catalog already, so like that'll like make it absolutely monstrous. That'll be sick.
Yeah, and it'll like a lot of those pieces are definitely shorter pieces. I mean, I think they're really cool and fun,
Yeah.
but they're shorter pieces, and something that's a little bit longer with more development and some more breathing room
Yeah.
will be nice to add to that as well.
That'll be sick. I'm excited to see it. All right, boss.
Me too.
Where can people find you online?
They can go to adrianbsims.com. Also, the Instagram is there as well. Facebook as well. Find me anywhere. Um, and yeah, I mean, I know a lot of folks are definitely trying to do this. I'm trying to just continue to find more engaging ways to engage with folks on social media and create more
Yeah.
content that really, like I do the Instagram stuff with the recording session and all that. I'm putting that out. I just try to really draw the viewer in to feel like they're part of the experience that we had
Yeah.
there, and just make them feel like they can kind of know what happens behind the scenes, and like it's not a secret that we hide. I never try to hide that information. I always want people to know what we do and how we do it efficiently.
For sure. Awesome. Awesome. Well, thanks for coming on today, boss.
Thank you.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Musical Trick Artista, the podcast. You can find this online at mcgowanmusic.com or listen on your favorite podcast platform. You can also visit us at Andrew McGowan on YouTube or Music McGowan on Instagram.